So far since 2026 MotoGP bikes hit the track, we've mostly talked about who's going to be riding where in 2027. We should stop that for a minute and talk about who's actually going fast in the build-up to this current season. This is the Race MotoGP Podcast. Sepang testing has finished, and I'm Matt Beer with Val Khorounzhiy and Simon Patterson, who's kind of crashing out at the end of his... just a week so far, isn't it? Oh no, you've got Kuala Lumpur launch stuff to go. Yeah, I was going to say you can chill.
I've still got 2 more days of work to do. Yeah.
Whatever Simon gets up to at the swanky stuff going on to launch the MotoGP season, keep an eye out for that on the MotoGP social channels that we run, and we might slip a little extra something into the Race Members Club on that front as well. But we should talk about on-track actual bikes going quickly or not quickly. Val, the first thing you said to me when you started work on Thursday morning was that you were buried in long-run data, so presumably you can give some immediate revelations on how much faster than everyone else Ducati is.
Oh yeah, it's super interesting. MotoGP has been turned upside down. It's nothing like you've known before, and it's definitely not just total continuity from the previous year of this regulation cycle that is in its final season.
You could have left that to like minute 52 of this episode.
I could have, but let's be honest here. Yeah. Not everybody did sprint simulations. Unfortunately, I would like to see more. I think mostly as a knock on of the second day being half rained out, and also it's part of the fact that the actual Sepang race weekend is not going to take place for a while. So sort of obvious performance running. I think in Buriram with the test immediately leading into the race, we're going to see some very, very clear performance running, both on single lap and on race trim, whether that's sprint simulation or even GP distance simulation. We're going to see a lot of that in the second test. Not as much in the first test, but still enough. We saw the 3 main Ducati protagonists all do pretty serious attempts at a sprint simulation, and those were the 3 best long runs. The best one belonging to Alex Marquez, the king of Sepang, the 50-time world champion of every race weekend was at Sepang. Pecco Bagnaia had the second best one. Marc Marquez had the third best one. Quite a bit of distance between those 3, I would say. Not massive, but tangible. But of course, we have to remember that Marc doesn't love this track, isn't necessarily fully fit, wasn't trying to push himself at the limit, was a bit fatigued with his shoulder, but just doesn't love this track, and that I think he would probably say okay to this kind of balance of power if this is how an actual race weekend at Sepang looked at this point in time. And Pecco much improved in feeling and sound compared to last year, but we also must remember he was generally good at Sepang last year, and so it's really early to take any conclusions from that, and he was still adrift of Alex Marquez, which ideally he would want to be in front of. Alex Marquez also ahead on single lap runs. Some riders did those at various times of the day at Sepang with the track temperature and all that, so you can't read a massive amount into it. But yeah, that's sort of the headline. I think is the usual guys look good, including Pecco Bagnaia. Marco Bezzecchi and Aprilia probably look pretty good. And you can see it on the single lap time that Bezzecchi was the closest to Alex Marquez on the headline lap. And their sprint sim wasn't particularly amazing, but it was done on very, very used tires, whereas the Ducatis were running new, so not particularly representative at all. Aprilia doesn't necessarily like Sepang very much, but quietly quite a credible test showing. But generally, I think the overall takeaway through as much as we can see right now is everybody's felt they've made a bit of progress in the off season, apart from Yamaha with its totally all new bike. And I would actually be surprised if the gaps have tangibly, massively changed, at least at Sepang, compared to what we saw last year.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about our Sepang world champion Alex Marquez today was that this time last year when he was setting the test pace and looking really promising, we all talked about the continuity of the year-old Ducati and the kind of cozy environment that created with a kind of well-sorted Gresini bike. This year, he has got the latest kit, Simon, so it's a bit more of an adventure. First time he's been doing that sort of work since way back in his Honda days. But I know it's got the kind of Sepang leaning helping him, but he's kind of moved into this new role pretty seamlessly. And yet he sounds like a person who's about to quit it and go somewhere else in 2027.
I mean, I think the realistic thing is probably that he's the third best Ducati at the minute.
In terms of what he's got kit-wise?
No, in terms of overall performance and package, because I think it's worth caveating that Marc is really still hurting and unfit. I'm looking at season-long performance. I'm looking at what we can take from this test and play it out across the season. Pecco is this looks like a bit of a resurgence in Pecco. This looks like a return to something more akin to 2024 form, where it is working at least. And I've heard a few rumors, few whispers in the paddock about what the kind of entire Ducati situation looks like that makes me think that that's the case as well. So I think that there's things are better on that side of the garage. Marc needs more time. He's confident that, the time between now and Thailand and the first race will give him a bit more of it. But we're looking at an Alex Marquez who's in a position that even 12 months ago, whenever he was so strong at Sepang, and this is the point that I'm trying to make, didn't have this sort of clout going into the season. Because even after a strong Sepang last year, Alex wasn't second in the world. No one was predicting that. Yeah. We were talking about what DJ Antonio was going to be able to do at this point last year, even though Alex was quicker. So I think this is very, very good from him. This is stepping up to the mark in a way that it would have been very easy for him not to do. With last year being a bit of a flash in the pan year, he's already kind of showing that Ducati's faith in him was the right move. He's showing that he wasn't just a one-hit wonder that put together a good kind of 3/4 of a season and got him second in the championship. Actually, he's last year was maybe the new Alex Marquez level, which is great. However, like you say, all of this comes as he basically admitted that he's probably going to go off and ride something else next year. And I mean, we've talked about this at length. I don't really blame him for it. I think that that's the right move for his career and for who he is as a person, as opposed to just being Marc Marquez's little brother. But he admitted that there are offers in the table. He admitted that one of them is obviously a Gresini offer that he says is the one that the one that feels most comfortable at the minute because it's the one that he knows. But from what we understand, there's very much a KTM offer in the cards here that's going to be like, it's going to be the Gresini offer with an extra zero stuck in the end. That's not even an exaggeration.
No. Probably a smaller bonus clause, but not a smaller enough bonus clause to make that sort of difference. If you didn't hear our first podcast earlier in the week after the opening day of testing, when we just went rider market crazy, there's a whole load of justification from us there for why actually Alex is probably sensible to be heading off to even a on paper less competitive factory ride than what he's got with Ducati at the moment.
I take exception to what you said. We didn't go rider market crazy. The rider market went rider market crazy, and we just reacted.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't do that grudgingly, did we? We weren't going, oh no, you've given us something really interesting to talk about. Val opened this podcast going, everyone's doing the same thing as they did last year, trying to make it interesting, Matt. Thanks, rider market. I'm not complaining.
Well, let's say for Alex Marquez, and specifically for 26, that the question was whether the extra testing workload, the actual testing workload, the fact that he was no longer in a position where he's just handed a hand-me-down bike that's totally ready, and you just pound laps and figure out your setup, and then you're much readier than everybody else coming into the opening rounds because all the other guys have been back-to-back testing swing arms or like aero stuff or all that kind of thing, and you're not in that position. Clearly, that has not meaningfully unsettled him and crew chief Donatello Giovanotti. All the credit to him. You look at the times generated, and it's as if he's still on a hand-me-down. It still looked very consistently up there, consistently easy to get the lap time, whatever configuration he was trying out, whatever he was testing. And I think he's mentioned that he doesn't feel as prepared personally because of all that extra test work, but it didn't show up on the times. Again, helps Sepang.
Parking Marc Marquez I say for a moment, I mean for a whole podcast, on the grounds that we can't judge where he's at until he's got his fitness back a bit more. Pecco Bagnaia interests me a lot this week. Now, Simon, you without giving away secrets, you need to expand on what you've heard about how Ducati's operating that makes this feel tangible. Because my first thought when seeing him doing better this week and sounding happier was to look back at the results from the end of last year that go terrible, 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 terrible. Oh, Sepang, that was all right. Oh, puncture. Terrible, terrible. This was an upwards blip for him this circuit last year. He's not a specialist to the Alex Marquez degree, but it is a good place for him where things might feel better. What makes it more than that?
I have heard some whispers that there have been conversations within Ducati post Valencia test last year where kind of Pecco may have acknowledged that the problems towards the end of the year were not the bike.
Okay.
And that there may have been a bit of a mea culpa moment that means he's come into this year a bit more with his head in a better place. And I know we talked about this at length last year, didn't we? About how the problems of the bike started as the number one issue, but then the problems with Pecco on the bike kind of overtook them to become the most important thing. And I think Ducati have brought a better bike. Pecco has realized that maybe he was responsible for some of the problems that they had last year. And the fact that he's admitted that and dealt with it, the fact that they've brought a bike that also addresses the issues he has, generally makes it look like I think this is a more put together package this year than it was 12 months ago. He did stress, and he makes a good point that actually the super important thing is going to be the Buriram test, because that was the first red flag last year for him that this wasn't going to be an easy season. So he's very keen to ditch Sepang and get to Buriram. The one thing I will say in his credit, to kind of counteract the fact that he goes well at Sepang, is this circuit this week is totally different from the circuit at the race in a way that kind of would have compounded the problems he was having last year. Because that kind of issue with the bike being almost like too grippy in corner entry and stuff, there's been like 5 days. There was 5 days of track action before the slightest whiff of rain here. There is so much rubber down on the track, and everyone is like complaining that the track is too good because they're not actually learning all that much from testing. I don't know if I remember a Sepang test where it's been like this good this long. There's normally more rain showers that kind of
at some point,
mess things up a little bit and stuff like that. We haven't had any of that. So that also kind of, I think, should be something that he's looking at and thinking, that's a good sign.
We also should talk about the personal side of what's going on, because nothing that we're hearing this week certainly suggests that whatever is going on in terms of immediate 2026 performance will have the time to impact Pecco Bagnaia's rider market situation, and that the way he answered certain questions about his future suggests that he is keenly aware that it's probably game over in terms of continuing within the Ducati factory seat, and it sounds like he's not particularly interested in a non-factory seat within the Ducati stable.
So sorry, I'm doing that thing where I tell Val something that I should have told him before the podcast. Right, he explicitly told Italian media tonight that he will not ride a satellite Ducati.
No.
That is no.
So that could put you in an awkward situation, and we don't know how it will be behind the scenes, but certainly I would have been a little apprehensive about the idea of fielding a rider who I've publicly shown no confidence in by moving for somebody else, that everybody knows that it's an open secret that you're pursuing somebody else and will probably have that somebody else signed before a race takes place. I will say that there was a question to Pecco as to whether it's frustrating that the way the timing has worked out, he's at the lowest point of his market value, that he's going to lose potentially this Ducati factory seat, this coveted gig at his lowest, up after having led the program for many of those years. And in response to that, instead of going, woe is me, he was like, that's the game, and that's fair enough, and that's how it should be. Which it's a good way to handle it. I'm quite impressed with that with that answer as a public stance on it, because it is really, really easy to say woe is me, or to say, hey, what's this 21-year-old Spaniard proven, hasn't even won a race? Why? Yeah.
Yes,
don't they remember who I am?
Yeah.
I didn't mean it like that, but when I know, maybe I did a little bit.
As soon as we started talking about Acosta and Ducati in the last episode, I kicked myself for not saying, Simon, why do they want him? He hasn't won a race yet. Because, obviously should have won 20 of those on the KTM to get your approval. Anyway, what were you going to say?
One thing that has kind of come out over the last few days from speaking to Italian colleagues, I've been traveling with Matteo Aglio and Cosimo Curamato from Mao, and they're convinced that Pecco is Yamaha bound, not Aprilia.
Mm-hmm.
The Italian vibe seems to be that Yamaha are trying to build a 2014 Mahindra Aspar dream team of Jorge Martin and Pecco Bagnaia, and then the general consensus is that Aprilia will be able to secure an Bastianini at an absolute bargain basement price by waiting until about November to sign him.
Okay,
interesting. Okay, I can see a load of logic to Yamaha and Bagnaia as a longer term thing. I mean, he's certainly going for the title rivals of 2 consecutive seasons, and packaging them together is a very good power move if you're trying to make up for the loss of your recent talisman. I go back to my point about beanstalks and chickpeas and stuff from the other day, wherever I was going with that. Aprilia is currently good. Yamaha is currently not good. Why don't you go to the place that's good for a little bit, and just, particularly for Pecco Bagnaia, when he just needs to get a little bit of confidence restored as well, he might do that with just a better Ducati the year, admittedly, this year. But what you're saying about how he's taken his likely ousting in favour of Acosta, though, just made me think, this is not to disparage what he achieved in winning those championships, but probably on balance, I think I've been more impressed by Bagnaia off track than on track on average over these years. And I'm not saying that's denigrate what he's doing on track. I'm just saying there's so many times when Bagnaia opens his mouth to talk about a situation and you go, that's really sensible, really measured, really just a kind of outside perspective that selfish sports people aren't supposed to have. So, and just to me, this just feels like another example of Pecco being a really good person. The other big story of testing, apart from the pace people showing on track, was someone missing from the circuit for at least not half the test in the end, but the middle chunk of it. Yamaha, a third of it, yeah. I guess if you count the shakedown percentage-wise, they come out okay.
No, shakedown's a different test. Doesn't count.
Yeah, no, true.
Well, I don't know about okay, sure, fair.
Anyway, I'm tangenting mid-sentence. I shouldn't. Yamaha had to pull out of Wednesday's test because they were concerned about safety and reliability issues with the new V4. Now, we discussed this in a video on our YouTube channel. If you're part of the Race Members Club, you've heard or seen that as well in Patreon. We will go into it here for the benefit of podcast-only listeners as well, because that's quite a dramatic development for a team, Simon, of Yamaha's stature to miss an entire test day. I can't remember a manufacturer having to do that in the modern era. It's not a great look, however sensible it is in a year where they're just kind of building and rebuilding anyway. That's a big move of kind of giving the impression of being in trouble.
I don't think it is. I think that we're maybe getting a bit carried away as a kind of collective MotoGP fan base of expecting Yamaha to be winning races at the V4 tomorrow. And it is very, very early in a brand new project. I think if something like this had happened in 12 months' time with the 850 for any manufacturer, we'd go, yeah, well, it is a brand new bike and these things are going to happen. And that is essentially where Yamaha are at. They've built a brand new MotoGP bike while building the old MotoGP bike. And there will eventually be little things that come to a head. The other thing is, I think if they hadn't had concession status and they hadn't been at the shakedown, we'd never have known there was a problem and they'd have just rode on. Maybe the fact that they had so much track time under their belts meant that it was an easier decision to make, just to kind of err on the side of caution. Then the other thing is we've talked a lot about how the Japanese manufacturers are changing and how they're operating these days and how they're becoming a bit more European and how they do things. we got a lot of information out of Yamaha about all the problems they had in the last 48 hours, and that is not how things used to be done. I went to the office to ask, to the comms team office, to basically ask, could they say anything about it? And their press officer, Maida, was just like, I'll get Massimo, or I'll get Maio Meregali for you right now. Yeah. And Maio spoke openly about the problems. And then I went back a little while later and said, look, is it possible to speak to someone? This is today, or this was last night, about, would it be possible to speak to someone tonight or tomorrow about it? And they were like, yes, how about 10 minutes with Paolo Pavesio, the team boss? That is cool. Like, good for them for being that upfront and honest about it. And I don't really think it's a massive crisis, all things considered, especially in the context of coming in a world where the new engine, the fast engine, is already, so it turns out, I think, already at Sepang in Andrea Dovizioso's test bike. To be brought to the rest of the MotoGP grid very soon. I don't think we're going to see it for round one, but I'd imagine we'll see it definitely before MotoGP returns to Europe. So I think in that context, it's going to be a minor blip in the radar down the line. It's just going to be part of the development. My first thought was like, which one of the F1 teams was running a flashing blue light in the back of the car the other day because they weren't allowed to go fast on track? Yeah. I thought on that right away and be like, it's not that bad, is it? And they're in that's kind of the same situation as it with a new rule cycle. Yamaha are in a one-team new rule cycle.
I get that. I absolutely get that. It's the perception thing. And the thing is, I really admire Yamaha for going, don't worry about the perception. This will look really bad to like the wider world. I look at the traffic that our video on it did. I look at the traffic that our web stories on it did. This is a thing that has caught more attention to the wider fan base, or at least the wider fan base that watches our videos and reads our website, than anything else MotoGP's done this year. Yamaha pulling out of a test day for that reason is the thing that's made people go, oh, what's going on there? So it's gone wide. Whether Yamaha are really worried about that or not, they made a really sensible, pragmatic decision to go, we don't need to run today. If it's a risk, let's figure this out. They did exactly the right thing. I'm glad they did the right thing. I'm glad they didn't worry about the perception, but the perception is still, that's dramatic, because major manufacturers in World Championship Motorsport very rarely do this. Before Val comes in, should we hear from Pavesio? Let's have a bit of your chat with him, Simon. A little snippet on his view of what happened, why Yamaha did what it did, and how it fixed it.
Paolo, first of all, thank you for your time on a busy weekend. A little bit of a blip with the project yesterday on the second day of the test, but glad to see you guys are back on track and everything is all resolved.
Yeah, it was important to resume, but it was also important to be sure of resuming. Of course, we are racing prototypes here, so nothing is always granted. It's not production machine, but we wanted to be sure that, let's say, the doubts we had were clarified before we were back on track. And super important, of course, to be back on track because we have a lot of work to do.
I guess it's been an issue that you've been able to fix locally rather than needing to get some stuff to sort it.
Let's say it was an issue that we could identify.
Yeah.
Working, this is sometimes the interesting part of working in Japan and in Italy. Yeah. So you can use the night of Japan to work in Italy and the night of Italy to work in Japan and in Sepang. So yes.
Yeah.
It was a 24 hours, let's say, journey, but important to close the test being on track.
Yes, absolutely. But aside from the issue, the test looks to have been quite successful. The bike is going pretty well and everyone seems to be quite, giving quite good feedback on it.
Yeah, I have to say at the end, this is a complete new bike, even comparing with Valencia.
Yes.
So we work a lot in the winter. It was important to identify if all the new things were properly working and working together. And I have to say, as the base bike to start the season, we got the information that we needed to get. The feedback of the rider are looking pretty consistent. Also quite important because on a new project, the more you can achieve the target to set the base bike, which is similar for all of them, I would say almost the closest the better. Then you can gather more consistent data and then there will be a moment where maybe there will be individual options.
Simon actually hung on long enough with Pavesio to also talk rider market, to talk Toprak Razgatlioglu's adaptation and loads of other stuff. That'll appear in various places across our coverage over the coming weeks. But if you want to watch and listen to all of it in the next couple of days, the Race Members Club is where it will be put exclusively in full, and you can grab your 7-day free trial. And like I always say, if you like it, stick around for more than 7 days. Val, what do you make of Yamaha's not just absence, but like what they did when they came back as well?
Yeah, it's a fair card. I think you make a fair point in that I really don't think it matters that much for the competitiveness, especially because half of the day that they lost, basically everybody lost anyway. It was wet.
Yeah, it's wet.
Nobody was doing anything. But you do get clowned on. So at that point, as a manufacturer, as a team, you have to institutionally safeguard all of your staff and everybody working from the clowning, being like, hey, this doesn't matter. People are going to say what they're going to say. There's going to be a lot of interest. There's going to be people talking about how this, aligns with the fact that you're already probably losing the best rider over your last 6 years, etc. And just don't worry about it. And it's not going to be necessarily easy, but at the same time, I wonder if the bigger clowning is still coming up at certain race weekends, because I don't know how good that bike is going to be. I think what Simon says that actually for 850, if one of the manufacturers did that, starting the 850 testing, and they sat out a day, I'd be a lot more alarmed. That would actually be, I think, a huge problem, because they're all sort of on similar footing. Whereas here, we know that Yamaha is kind of having to a little bit shortcut the same processes that everybody else has gone through on their V4 journey much earlier in this regulation cycle. So for me, it makes total
25
sense.
years earlier.
Yeah, true.
So it makes total sense that it isn't necessarily going to be smooth or linear to get that bike to a competitive level to where it's worth showing up week to week, right? Now, because Fabio Quartararo hurt himself immediately on the first day and then pulled out from the test, and I don't think we actually know whether he had known by then that the bikes are going to be parked, because obviously he did return to the track. Yeah,
it was his return to the track that flagged the issue.
Yeah. And
for the second time, after an issue that Toprak had already had in the shakedown.
Yeah, exactly. So I think without Fabio, it's difficult. The fastest Yamaha time of the test you would expect to be a Fabio Quartararo time. The fastest simulation of the test you would expect to be a Fabio Quartararo simulation, even if he's maybe a little bit disgruntled or is signing contracts with some other manufacturers. And it was only narrowly beaten what he did in the shakedown and what he did on the first day of testing after already hurting himself. Those times were only narrowly beaten by Alex Rins. So if you look at the headline times, maybe you can sort of gift a few extra tenths to the Yamaha project there or thereabouts. I think in race pace, there isn't usually a huge difference between them. And we saw a Jack Miller sprint simulation that was reasonable, but ultimately over a second per lap off, which, again, that might be fine. That might also have to do with when he ran. He ran in the first part of the day. Most of the really quick sprint simulations were in the second part of the day. He sounded reasonably content, but I also think there's probably a little bit of an expectation that when Yamaha begins the season, I don't know where to place it. That's a tough one. But I always just said it's fighting Diogo Moreira. I probably know, but maybe, because everybody's so good that even if your project has started off reasonably, I really don't think you must be expecting that much more. In modern MotoGP, that might mean fighting the rookie, right? So is it a problem if they show up to Thailand and they're fighting Diogo Moreira? I would say no, but I would also say that then you're going to get some kicks in from the media, from the fans. You're going to get Fabio showing up to media sessions and going, well, like, what am I doing here? What are we accomplishing besides like an extended test session for the future of the 27 project, whatever. I think that will be a tough one to navigate. And maybe the bike is good enough to where you don't just fight the stragglers. You're like legitimately in the mix for some things. Certainly, we didn't see that yet at Sepang. But I don't know. It's hard to say, especially it's double hard to say without Fabio.
The level of expectation management in so many Yamaha interviews this winter, even what was said on the stage at the launch, has been strong, hasn't it? They're going out of their way to go, if we are where you're predicting, Val, that's fine with us. This is not about 2026. I just don't know if the world is noticing that when this is still a Yamaha project with a V4 that's been talked about for so long as a possibility. And with a disgruntled Quartararo and a very high-profile newcomer in Toprak Razgatlioglu with a passionate fan base and a big legacy of success somewhere else, that's a combination that if that's kind of fighting for 18th, 19th, 20th, however much expectation management has been done on stage at a launch and in media scrums, that's not going to have permeated the wider world. People will be looking at that going, is this V4 just rubbish?
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. That's, it's not fair, but it's kind of inevitable. I agree with that, and that's just the byproduct of the level of the formula that we find ourselves in. I think it is worth talking a little bit about Toprak also specifically.
Yeah.
Had a very, very interesting test. Sort of, I don't want to say the honeymoon phase is over, but that's kind of a little bit what's happening here. Is he obviously had a very strong start, very professional, very accomplished rider. All the early signs were good, but sometimes in MotoGP, then you come up, you hit a bit of a rookie wall, or you suddenly realize that it feels like I'm doing everything right, but the lap time isn't coming for one reason or another, which is what it sounds like he's felt through the Sepang test, that he didn't find the track particularly agreeable to the style that he's bringing over to World Superbikes. And quite interestingly, what he spoke about, when we talk Toprak, we always spoke about the corner entry on the brakes, his hard braking style from World Superbikes, and how the Michelin front is going to survive that relative to the Pirelli front and the whole World Superbike formula. He's happy on corner entry, but it's the management of the rear tire, the Michelin rear, the stronger part of the Michelin package, that has been giving him trouble, that he's struggling to wrap his hand around. And he said that, we were quite impressed with how Nicola Bulliga debuted his World Superbike rival in his replacement rides for Marc Marquez last season. Well, Toprak said that, like for instance, at Sepang, Bulliga might be faster right now, for instance, as a World Superbike convert, because it's just like there are things about that track and his style that would make that transition more natural. Toprak's always spoken about how it will take time. I think his latest estimate is like the first 5 races. I might need to do some serious thinking and do some serious rewiring. Maybe it's kind of good if the Yamaha engine isn't quite ready to compete anyway, and then Toprak could also do his learning at that point, do his rewiring at that point. I don't know. Maybe that's good, or maybe that's doubly bad. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, it's quite interesting that just as we're trying to getting the first signs of what the Yamaha competitiveness is, now there's some work for Toprak to do. Maybe not in an area that we necessarily expected.
Simon, when you spoke to Toprak, I think maybe at the FIM Awards last year, I remember listening to that interview and thinking he's spot on about the process that he's going to have to go through to adapt to a MotoGP bike. But I feel like his timeline is too compressed when he's talking kind of single-digit number of events to get to grips and then being really competitive, particularly with Yamaha in the position it's going to be. I just feel like that's too short a timescale for the work he needs to do here.
I think he's aware that he needs to focus on being competitive with the other Yamahas and not, just suddenly winning MotoGP races that no one else is able to do at the minute. But he's having big problems with riding style. And I think the fundamental issue that has led him down this rabbit hole of kind of thinking that it would be an easy fix is thinking that he would be able to make the bike work to his riding style. And I think there was a revelation, maybe even today, because we talked quite a bit today. He's an interesting character because he's very, very open about how he's feeling, and he very openly talked about the frustration he was feeling today and how it was making him slower on track because he was frustrating himself and not being able to be competitive. And that's all coming from trying to make his riding style work on this bike. And then he eventually kind of conceded that actually he needs to change how he fits onto the bike. And it is about fit more than anything else. You can see quite easily he kind of sits in the bike, if that makes sense. Yeah. He likes a bike that surrounds him, whereas everyone else in MotoGP is perched on top of the thing, hanging off it. And whenever he does that, he gets no feeling. He feels too loose, too wobbly on it, basically. And I actually had a conversation with him, not in a media debrief over the week, where he was telling me about the 22 test that he did. Do you remember whenever he jumped on the M1 with Cal Crutchlow at Aragon? And how that was the problem at that test, that he had the same feeling of kind of being on top of the bike and couldn't get any confidence from it. But he kind of conceded today that he's going to have to go that route because that's how you ride a MotoGP bike. And I think that will change the expectations and the timeline going forward now for him.
The way he has the handlebars right now is...
He has two sets of handlebars.
Yeah.
He has normal MotoGP handlebars that he doesn't like, and then he's got what he calls his touring bike bars that are like big, broad, wide, flat things. Yeah.
And we also have to remember that apart from the adaptation side, he is also a particular build.
Yeah,
like he's in terms of body, he's a little bit closer to me maybe than to your standard MotoGP rider.
It's weird. He's shorter than Luca Marini, but he's bigger.
Yeah.
And he just naturally carries a bit more
as well.
Yeah, he is a little bit shorter than Luca, but he carries more muscle.
We just had the most ridiculous off-air conversation about whether Val will be competitive in Moto2 or not based on his mix of height, leanness, and complete lack of muscle. We'll save that for the off-air chat. Maybe that'll appear on Patreon one day. Basically, Val's mega. Anyway, back to people who actually do ride racing motorcycles. We talked a little bit about Aprilia. I think we've kind of covered where Aprilia are, basically. Kind of stealthy, not their best track, but still looking like Val. I'd say they're probably, in Marco Bezzecchi's hands, the main threat to Ducati right now. Nothing's changed their position from the end of last season.
100%. It actually was, I think, a really, really good test. And I would have liked... I'm now irrationally annoyed at Marco Bezzecchi and Aprilia for doing that sprint simulation on used tires. Please give us good data. Please let us know what's actually going on. My main Aprilia thought right now is what's Jorge Martin's level with this bike, please. I must know. Please let me know. I have no idea. It's been more than a year and I still I'm not even close to knowing. I feel like I know less than I did than a year ago, which I mean maybe is my fault. Please let me know. Please be healthy for the second part of testing in Thailand. Please be healthy for the opener. I want to know. I must know. Because it feels like, relative to the Trackhouse guys, it's as it was, I would say, generally speaking, looking at the tests that a very sickly Ayagura and a healthy but occasionally slightly confused Raul Fernandez had. Confused in the sense that it sounds like he's like the qualifying part of it still isn't coming easy, and we know that happens sometimes. I have to know about the Jorge Martin side of things. Please let me know.
You know why?
Go on, Simon.
You know why Raul Fernandez is a little bit confused about what's happening on day 3 in Sepang?
Because he never got that far.
He gave it away on day 1 whenever we turned up for his media debrief, and he was like, "Look, a debrief at the end of day 1, and I'm here for it."
Yeah.
I mean, he's done a lot of development work this week. He's done a lot of writing bits for Aprilia this week, which is a situation he's not particularly used to. And I'd imagine that is where some of the confusion is coming from, is kind of being made to be a development writer, a factory writer, I suppose, for the first time. I think his situation will come together. That he just needs someone else to help him kind of pick a bike out of all the bits they've got now, I think.
Yeah, I'm giggling because while doing some kind of organizational research earlier this week, I looked back at our work chat from the first day of testing last year, and it was just, oh, he's broken. Whoa! I was watching. I remember sitting with the kids to have breakfast and watching MotoGP highlights clips they're putting up on their website, and that's how my son learned what a collarbone was. I can't remember if that was from Raul or Didier that day, or both. But
Didier was banned from doing wheelies this year.
Good. Good.
The one Aprilia takeaway that actually stuck with me out of this test is, so we all remember, the three of us, the days when Aprilia would get to the end of a test, or just occasionally the end of a particularly hot race, and like riders like Aleix would be falling off the bike because it was a really physical, demanding thing to ride. And I think it was yesterday at the end of the second day, we were talking to Lorenzo Savadori about it, who was like, this thing is so easy to ride. This is not a physically demanding bike to ride anymore. And I think that was a really interesting takeaway from it. Like, Aprilia haven't just made the bike faster. They've done a lot of work in kind of making the bike easier and a bit more rider friendly.
And that was the trajectory they've been heading on in terms of the handling as well for so long, that it just feels like we talked at the start about how this was a kind of continuation season. And actually that can sound like all things are going to be dull, but also Aprilia was closing on Ducati. Aprilia was pulling together everything it had been doing for years. It really could do with two actually fit top class riders. And Val, I think you're being wonderfully optimistic, hoping that we'll get a read on Martin's pace before a few races into the season, because he has never ridden an Aprilia fully fit. He has not been on a MotoGP bike in a fit state really since the test after he won his championship. He's not going to come back as like proper Jorge Martin. This is, I know he's giving proper recovery time, but that's more bike and race rustiness time as well. So yeah, we just got to keep looking at the Bez laps and hope they put some new tyres on soon, so we can go, oh, okay, we have got, if not a championship, a bit of a question mark over which manufacturer will win some races. Simon?
I've just realised that Aprilia have built a very easy to ride, friendly bike that's really fast through the corners, makes rookies look good, and Maverick Vinales has just stormed off in disgust to ride something else. They've built a 2018 Yamaha.
It wasn't quite in disgust, was it?
I mean, it wasn't in disgust, but they thought he was staying.
Yeah. Okay. I'm kind of looking at my kind of Maverick disgust-ometer, and I was like, well, he didn't blow the bike up. Anyway, Honda. Let's go there next. Honda, a team that was quickest in the shakedown, a team that was making a lot of progress through the end of last season. But Val, what was the vibe this week? Because it sounded like, although Joan Mir did some decent headline times at different points, it sounded like he was a little bit miffed at the gap that was still there to Ducati and some of the data.
Yeah, I would say so. The single lap, the lap that was on day two was a proper competitive one. It was a pretty good one. But the sprint simulation, it's not quite there. We don't know. Again, we don't know the state of the tires. We don't know like the fuel they carried. For some reason, they did 11 laps and not 10. So maybe they don't know how long a Sepang sprint is, but I suspect they do. And I suspect there was a reason why all the Honda riders, so that's, well, apart from Diogo Moreira, who's just still learning the ropes, but, Jean Zarco, Joan Mir, and Luca Marini all did 11 laps, whereas everybody else was normal about it, generally doing 9 or 10, yeah. But they're getting close, but they're just not there yet still, which is, you would expect that, I guess, given the trajectory they were in. But there's been so much Honda positivity and potentially positivity compounded by some serious rider market moves that it's easy to get carried away a little bit. The way Mir put it after today, after the sprint simulation, was if the race weekends tomorrow, we're maybe fighting for top 5, top 4, but not more. That even kind of struck me as a little bit optimistic, maybe. That's not bad, is it? Top 5, top 4, but
not in Honda's position in recent years, is it? That's
but it's also, fine, I guess it's also not good. Is that fair to say? Because this is the final year of this reg cycle. If you're slowly but surely going from top 4, top 3, top 2, top whatever, and then the season's over and the bike's in the trash compactor and you're doing an all new thing from scratch, that is kind of very, very slightly disappointing. And that's me talking. That's not Honda talking, because Honda, like every other manufacturer and every other rider in this test, apart from like a couple, said, yeah, everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. It's the happiest series in the world. Everybody's so super happy. Clearly, everybody is going to win the opening race.
It's nice and open, isn't it? Simon, before you come in, Val, I think it was you, Val, who said in our work chat that it was unusual to not hear positivity from a Honda rider. And I was just like, Val, short memory. I remember all of 2020 to the middle of 2025 inclusive.
Yeah.
Recently, though, I take your point. Simon.
So it was regarding their kind of the shakedown performance and the fact that the bike looked so fast there. A friend was speaking to someone within Honda who will remain nameless, kind of said to them about it, and the response was just, yeah, Aleix loves a qualifying lap, doesn't he? which was like, yeah, that's a fair point, well made, that is. And it's like, Aleix saying that the Honda is the best MotoGP bike he's ever rode after the shakedown, like that should come with a bucket of salt. Because it's just Aleix.
Yeah.
He's not doing it to be...
he means it, doesn't he?
No, he means it. But that doesn't mean
also it
true.
should be. It also absolutely 100% should be.
Every MotoGP bike should be better every year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's the fastest one, obviously, but the problem is every bike is the fastest bike.
Exactly. If he rode an Aprilia, would he still say that the Honda is the best MotoGP bike he's ever rode?
No,
probably not the current one. But it's Aleix. So you just, I think anyone that is basing Honda's expectations for 2026 on Aleix alone should seek treatment. Yeah. Because
all right, well, I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, he did have the Suzuki stint. He was at Aprilia when they got intermittently good, then very good. But really,
Maverick referenced a test at Sepang where they were like 1 and 2 in a day in his debrief whenever he was talking about like good days at Sepang.
Yeah. I was thinking, Aleix's best MotoGP bike he's ever ridden, the list of good ones is so short for him still. It's
true. It's true.
It's not like much of an accolade, really. Yeah, exactly.
Barely even qualifies MotoGP bikes.
No, okay, I'll take that, yeah. The last team we haven't talked about is KTM. Now, traditionally, I feel like in the many years of testing podcasts I've done with you two, now there's always been a kind of KTM mystery box where we go, don't really know what KTM's doing during this test, let's see what happens. I feel like we do kind of know what KTM's doing this year, because Pedro Acosta is doing the Pedro Acosta thing, and some of his times are good. And it's a repeat of the end of last year for Brad Binder, who I think, Val, was kind of top of your list of people who are not happy, and happy to admit they're not happy right now.
No, he said happy.
Yeah, he said it.
Oh, yeah,
he said it like a lot.
He obviously didn't
like
mean
in a way that means nothing.
I have to admit, I don't entirely believe that, but I don't want to be that guy. I will say, like, before we go to KTM, I want to give a shout out to a person who said he was not so happy. Bless you, Ayagura. Thank you for being honest. I really I really appreciate that. And obviously, Toprak, we spoke about, also did sort of project a certain not happiness. It's okay to be unhappy. Yeah. Let that be the lesson of,
preseason testing.
Of this podcast.
Okay.
It's okay to be unhappy.
Life advice.
And I think there you go. That's obviously the right person to take it from. I think KTM, I don't think should be over the moon with how the test went, with certain caveats that, it's KTM and testing. So, testing is difficult to read into at the best of times. KTM testing, you might as well just give up and leave. Pedro Acosta wasn't that fast in the final combined times on peak lap, but they were all quite quick to go. They didn't run at the right time of the day, etc. And that's a kind of a handy excuse, but he probably could have done a 56.8, which is still distant, but it's not, it's not terrible. I don't think they expect super great stuff from this track. His sprint simulation was all right, but it was also kind of basically the same as his sprint simulation from last year, I think, except maybe they have less tire wear issues. He said that he was happier than he was last year coming out of the test, but he also described it as a 6 out of 10. It's not an amazing.
I mean, that's
number.
a pretty standard Pedro score. Nothing's ever been 9 or 10 or above for that guy.
Yeah. It's like 13 for Maverick, 6 for Acosta.
And he is he also has been speaking about this season with it's hard to 100% know how to read it, because I think you can also do him a disservice and say something like, oh, he's just sort of not checked out, but he's prepared not to be winning ahead of an expected move to Ducati where he should be winning. And I don't think it's quite that, but I think he has agreed that the way he went into last year with huge expectations, they were dashed early on and it was counterproductive, and he was struggling, and he was even hurting his own market value a little bit in that early part of the season. He clearly doesn't want any repeat of that. He just wants to, he's under contract. That's not changing. So he wants to just go in and get what he wants to get and probably just get that first win, but he doesn't necessarily carry huge aspirations of, fighting for the championship against the Ducatis. It's everybody feels like they've made a step in that area. So it's kind of like almost, like as I said at the start, we're in a similar situation to where we were. I liked Enea Bastianini's single lap okay at the end of the test, because it's felt like I see Simon. I agree. Simon is not.
It's not even the single lap. It's something else.
The sprint simulation.
No, it's the fact that he said the KTM race department's second least favorite word after bankruptcy.
Yeah, vibration
chatter
in the sprint simulation.
Yeah. Like that chatter problem that they've been working really hard to fix kind of came back the first time he pushed on a bit with the bike for sprint simulation. That's a worry.
Which was terrible. Which was
really,
also terrible. Really poor.
Yeah. Although he did try and blame a Duff tire.
No, I think he said it wasn't the tire. I think he said it was on the rear tire, but it wasn't the tire.
So I think it was just the bike chatter and it's brains out again. Excellent.
Yeah.
Top work.
Yeah. So that's not great. I mean, Marc Marquez is super, super positive and also potentially soon to sign a factory contract, which he already has, but a factory team contract.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about Brad a little bit, because you did foreshadow it, and then I went on a massive tangent.
And about the true nature of happiness.
Yes. Look, maybe he is happy. He admitted that he went for a lap time. He feels more comfortable on the bike, but he went for a lap time and it did not come. The whole problem with last season, like all of it, we talked obviously feeling on the bike, etc. Maybe crashed sometimes, maybe let some opportunities slip, etc., etc. The whole issue is 22-0 versus Pedro Acosta in qualifying. That's the whole problem. There's nothing else to discuss about Brad Binder's 2025. At least before you acknowledge that. That's always the first thing that you must acknowledge. That was the hard stop as to the limitation as to what was achievable. If he still can't qualify that bike the way, like for the lap time that it needs to do, if he can't be high enough on the grid, then this is unsolvable. And here he admitted that he was trying qualifying stuff. I think he admitted anyway. That's what it sounded like, that he was trying sort of some qualifying work and that it wasn't coming. The lap time wasn't coming, and you look at the sheets at the end of the 3 days, and he's not very high up. Now the sole caveat there, a lot of testing work within the KTM structure as a KTM factory rider, and he mentioned that new crew chief Phil Marin has not yet really got to do what he's here to do, has not really got to do some creative setup solutions and stuff like that. They're not yet being the new combination of Marin and Binder that this was the whole idea for by KTM, to take Brad out of his comfort zone that he had been in with Andres Mendes, his previous crew chief.
I should say that regardless of whether or not Brad Binder actually is happy, if he is, he shouldn't be.
No.
As someone who's on the verge of being replaced by Maverick Vinales and Alex Marquez, like given their kind of the hype around Brad Binder in the early part of his career versus the hype around, bike killer Maverick Vinales and the guy who only got his seat because of who his brother was. I don't believe that, but you know what I mean? Like Brad Binder was the wonder kid, and neither of those guys have been for a very long time. And the fact that they're legitimately probably going to take a seat, that's not a good thing for him.
No, that seems like a suitably not really happy down note to end this podcast, but I think we have covered, everything of note from testing so far. Simon, you're off to do something swanky. Do you know any details of what you're doing and what the launch and stuff involves yet?
Not really. It's probably a bit last minute. It's been a bit last minute to the extent that the first job of tomorrow is going to buy a suit in Kuala Lumpur, because I've been invited to the black tie dinner tomorrow night, and I do not have the clothing options for that. So that's step one, and then the main event is on Sunday, where they're closing off.
Does anyone at Aprilia have any kind of wedding leathers left over that you can borrow? Because they are quite smart.
You think Marco Bezzecchi's leathers are going to fit me? Yeah, that's what I thought too. They're closing off 2.5 kilometers of streets below the Petronas Towers so that the guys can ride their actual MotoGP bikes this year, because they learned from our criticism last year of having them on stupid road bikes that broke down. So they're going to be riding MotoGP bikes through the streets of central Kuala Lumpur on a Sunday evening, which is going to be awesome. And then for some reason that no one really understands, the script will play.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, World Championship Motorsport likes its random bans at things, though, doesn't it? That's just a thing that happens. It's probably not for us. Anyway, to see if Simon does successfully secure a suit and get a gig review as well, keep an eye on the Race Moto social channels and the Race Members Club. We'll be back to look ahead probably to some more testing, but maybe report some firm rider market moves, because I can't see we're going to get another week without something else happening.